Hello and welcome to the IIUSA EB5 Investor Market webinar series. This is our discussion on the Russian and CIS investor markets, but of course we'll cover a host of important industry topics on today's call. I noticed, I was just going through our attendee list, and I noticed participants from 12 countries around the world. So welcome to everyone, whether that's early in the morning, in the afternoon, or late at night. We're glad to have you here for this important discussion. As you'll see here on our screen, this is our sponsors and partners for today's event. I did want to note that all of our sponsors of today's discussion are members of IIUSA. Now, IIUSA, for those who are not familiar, is Invest in the USA. It's the nonprofit trade association for professionals in the EB5 industry. We represent over 250 member organizations, both in the United States and around the world, in government affairs and advocacy, as well as education and business development. As I noted, all of the participants on today's call are members of the association. They are directly involved in the association's efforts to ensure that the EB5 program has a long and bright future, and engage directly with us in all of our initiatives, whether that's advocacy, business development, research and analysis, and everything else that the association does. So thank you first and foremost to our sponsors for their support for this event, and also their support of the association's initiatives throughout the course of the year. A quick disclaimer on this discussion. This webinar is intended for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice in any way. You should always consult with your legal counsel with any questions or concerns on this topic. However, with that said, all the information that is presented today is deemed to be accurate and up to date as of the recording of this discussion. I do see someone already has their hand raised. So quick housekeeping items. All of the participants on today's call are in listen-only mode. Rather than raising your hand, we do have a Q&A function enabled, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Our panelists today will cover a host of topics. They will pause periodically if there are relevant questions to discuss during their panel presentation, but they'll also dedicate time at the end of the discussion to answer all the questions. I did want to note, before I get to that slide, there are two panels today. So our first panel will be focusing on more of the basics of EB5 and recent program updates, both on the legislative and government affairs front. Our second panel will take a deeper dive into project due diligence, the project selection process, and the various steps behind the EB5 investment immigration process. So please do ensure you stick around for both discussions. With that, I wanted to quickly present some data insights that the association IIUSA has put together here. As you'll see on your screen, there have been 562 EB5 investors from Russia between 2008 and 2018. As you'll note, also in 2018, Russia saw its highest number of investors in a given year with 91. We have data up until 2018. That is the most up-to-date data that IIUSA has been able to gather from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. But certainly the Russia market is growing and an important one. On top of that, wanted to quickly highlight the other two emerging markets in the CIS region, Ukraine and Kazakhstan. As you'll see there, Ukraine had 76 investors in the same time period, and Kazakhstan had 60. So two other interesting markets as well, and I noticed a host of registrants from both Ukraine and Kazakhstan for today's discussion. Okay, so that's enough of me talking, I think. You're here to listen to our expert panelists. So with that, I want to introduce the panelists for our first panel. That is U.S. investment opportunities in the EB5 and EB5 legislative updates. So going in alphabetical order here, I want to introduce Aaron Chichegda, who's the Managing Director of Golden Gate Global. Aaron, if you want to say a few words of introduction.
Sure. We are a regional center and investment firm based in San Francisco, California. And we have about $1 billion under management today, and have been in EB5 over the last decade. And I'm also one of the board of director members at the IIUSA. So very pleased to be a part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Rush, how about you next? Oh, Rush, you're on mute, looks like.
Helps to unmute. My apologies. Rush Deacon with Pine State Regional Center. We are part of a larger organization, Arkansas Capital Corporation, which has been around for more than 6 decades, is a private nonprofit, in essence, an NGO that does economic development activities. We formed our regional center several years ago and have a current project in the market that we'd love to tell you about if when we have a chance.
Thank you, Rush. Noreen?
Hi, my name is Noreen Hogan. I am president of CNB Regional Centers. CNB Regional Centers has been in the EB5 space for over 20 years. We've raised over $3 billion of EB5 funds, which importantly represents, over 5,700 investor families that are seeking their goal of moving to the United States. We have experience in almost any project asset class, and we look forward to helping you if you have any questions.
Noreen and Mr. Kraft.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Bob Kraft, I'm the CEO, Chairman of First Pathway Partners. We're headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are a regional center that operates in Wisconsin, Illinois, and California. We've been in the business since 2008. I've been a member of IIUSA since that time and have served on the board of directors for a number of years, and most recently and currently serving as president of IIUSA, which is a great honor. It's a great organization. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Bob. And Irina, I'll turn it over to you, but just quickly, Irina Rostova will be moderating today's discussion, which is certainly a panel of experts, as you can clearly see. So Irina, I'll turn it over to you, and then let me know. I have control of the PowerPoint, so just let me know when we want to change slides.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Irina Rostova. I'm an immigration attorney. I focus on working with EB5 investor visas. At this point, my firm has represented about 700 families from pretty much every country in the world. And of course, I focus a lot on Eastern Europe and Russian-speaking clients. I've been traveling to Russia with EB5 presentations since 2012. So it's been a long journey. It's been a great one. And we look forward to sharing even more information and sharing the experience that we've had with working with that region for the last 8 or 9 years. Right. And so Mackenzie, I will moderate the panels, and IIUSA will provide the slides for it. For those of you who are participating, the recording will be available later, and you can ask questions. Please send your questions to the chat. If I can, I will try to ask the panelists those questions as they're coming in, but I do want to give the panelists an opportunity to cover all the topics, and then we'll go to your questions at the end of the presentation. So today we're going to start with EB5 basics. What is an EB5 program? And for those of you who are more familiar with it, we will go more in depth about the updates, but we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So let us tell you about the EB5 program and how it works. Aaron, if you can tell us about the program requirements, please.
Maybe I'll start with the purpose of the program. Basically, it's twofold. First and foremost, EB5 is an economic development program geared towards encouraging job creation in the United States, especially in areas that need it the most. That is why U.S. government in the beginning initiated this program early 1990s. And then also, of course, it is purposed to provide a straightforward path for foreign investors to secure a permanent residency in the United States through an immigrant investment opportunity. So there are many equivalent programs, as you may know, in other countries, but EB5, probably one of the few, if not the only one, is geared towards job creation and has certain requirements on that, which I believe Rush will talk about.
Okay. Irina, I'll just jump in, and as the slide says, the 3 basic requirements for investment in the program. First of all, the amount of investment, $900,000, is the minimum amount. That's for an investment in a targeted employment area. That's a term of art for EB5 purposes. It's a rural area or an urban distressed area qualifies as TEA. That $900,000 investment amount is for a TEA investment. Your investment has to go into a job creating enterprise, and that organization, that project must create at least 10 jobs for every investor. So that's one of the things on the front end that you will be showing in the petition that you file, and then ultimately proving that those jobs were being created or have been created at the end of your process. The last thing that we note here is the investment must be at risk. Once again, that's a term of art for EB5 purposes. It does not mean the investment has to be a risky investment. It could, in fact, one of the things as an investor you'll be looking for is to know that you have a very safe investment, but it must be at risk, like an equity investment for investment purposes.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you, Rush. And then Aaron, can you tell us, is there a limit on the visas that the green cards that investors can receive? And how does that limit affect our audience?
So, I mean, the number of visas is 10,000, right? That's the quota every year that is eligible for EB5. And who can benefit from it is the petitioner and any of their dependents, their spouse, and any unmarried children that are younger than 21 years of age. So if you're thinking about, let's say, a very large family that I have 8 kids, I will, with my spouse, I would take 10 visas out of that 10,000 number for that particular year if I'm investing. That is actually a great feature, not the visa number side, but the ability to be able to include your dependents is a great ability, because you, with one investment, can include all your closest kind of core family into that investment and basically move your family and life into the United States. But there are no restrictions as to where you would live if you make that move. For example, if you invest in one of our projects, if it's, let's say, in San Francisco, where we're based in, and many of our projects are, but you are interested in, I don't know, middle of America, you can live in Kansas City and you would be very happily living over there, although your investment is secure in the Bay Area. So there is no restriction whatsoever in terms of where you reside, depending on, irrelevant of your location of your investment.
Excellent. So investors can invest in the best project that they decide is the best one for them across the country, and they can choose any place in the United States where they want to live. And Rush, if you can quickly tell us about the regional centers. What are regional centers, and what's the difference between a direct investment or a regional center investment?
Sure. Well, as we said in our introductions, 4 of us, all the panelists are all representing regional centers. Regional center is a creation of legislation that allows a organization to apply to the US CIS Immigration Service to become a regional center, and you're granted a designation as a regional center for a specific geography. What we do as a regional center is pool investments from various investors into a qualifying project, and quite frankly, work directly with the investor as they go through the process of investment application with an attorney that, such as yourself, Irina, that would be handling the original petition, working very closely with the regional center in terms of fund administration and documentation. The issue of direct versus regional center, there are some investors that just think they want to have their own business and create their own jobs. That's possible. It's just, it's difficult. And it's proven out by, quite frankly, how many EB5 investments are done through regional centers versus direct. I think it's, I'm not sure the exact number, but it's well over 95% of EB5 investments are done through regional centers, because you are able to count indirect jobs when you invest through a regional center. And that's one of the huge advantages. That makes it easier for the investor to meet that 10 job requirement for their $900,000 investment. The regional center works with an economist or has their own economist on staff who does the econometric analysis of the construction and all of the different aspects of the project. And from that, the spend that you're making, and then shows through an approved USCIS econometric model, can prove up the number of jobs and increase the ability of an investor to meet that job requirement that we talked about earlier. So regional centers are clearly, most of the program is through regional centers. You visit with your attorney to understand more about the risks of doing it direct versus regional center, but that's RCs are typically the way you'll go.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we can move on to the next slide. So now hopefully our audience understands the basics that the EB5 program allows for nationals to obtain green cards, that 95% of investors choose to go through regional centers, which are entities that take care of the job creation and managing the project, and that families, so spouses and children under 21 years of age at the time of the application, are included. So next, let's move on to Noreen, who is the president of CMB. Noreen has already mentioned that CMB has raised more than $3 billion in EB5 financing. So they have seen all different types of projects that they have financed through this program. Noreen, can you tell us, with the changes that have happened with COVID in 2020 and the changes in the hospitality industry, all the worldwide economic changes, what do you anticipate to see in the EB5 market? What kind of projects will investors see that they can invest into to qualify for EB5?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that everyone understands that COVID has impacted, specific industry sectors differently. But I think everyone understands that COVID has had a major impact on capital markets. Marrying COVID and EB5, one of the things is, the EB5 requirements since COVID has hit, have not changed. And so therefore, I would say, generally, you're going to see the same types of projects post-COVID, but I think there's going to be some general changes. One are you're probably going to see projects that have smaller raises generally. And I think that there's going to be a larger focus on fully capitalized projects with the caveat as well as if the project's unable to raise the entirety of the EB5 raise, where is the project going to be backfilling that part of the capital stack? But to focus in a little bit on some of the specific sectors that you talked about here, when it comes to commercial buildings, multifamily, and retail, I think that you're still going to see EB5 projects in this space. I think one of the things that you're going to find regional centers and also investors looking at when they either look to undertake them or move forward in these are, leases. What sort of, especially for like retail and offices, what sort of leases are in place? Is it pre-leased? If there are leases, what do those leases look like? Can the tenant get out of them? When it comes to infrastructure, kind of marrying commercial buildings and infrastructure, one of the sectors in the economy that has really grown is industrial and logistics centers, which supply our country's infrastructure and supply chain. And so I think you're going to see projects in that continue to boom because those are areas that really have almost excelled based upon COVID and the necessary supply chain that we have in our country. And then Irina, you mentioned hotels and hospitality. I think obviously that sector is going to be the hardest hit. I think if anyone was looking at EB5 previously, what you would notice is that hotels in the hospitality space were a large majority of the projects that you would see in EB5. I do believe that you are going to see very few hospitality projects in the coming years. It's been the hardest sector hit due to COVID, and I think it's going to be very difficult for the absorption in the market for new hospitality projects to be put in the market.
Mm-hmm. So we're expecting to see less hotels in essence, and more infrastructure, more commercial buildings that are helping with the supply chain and with the recovering economy. Thank you so much, Noreen, for that summary. And we can go to the next slide. And let's talk about some of the changes, new administration and program updates. We have had a change in the president this year. So we went from, the Trump's administration, now we're in Biden's administration. Bob Kraft will tell us about the changes we have already seen in the industry. What does that mean for immigration as a whole? What it means for the EB5 program? And we'll also talk about June 30th, which is an important date in EB5 because the program is set to expire. The EB5 program was the regional center one, was implemented in 1992, and it was never made permanent. So it expires every few years to a few months and gets extensions. So for us in the industry, it is not a new concept. We go through this almost every year. But let's talk to our audience. And Bob, can you tell us what does the June 30th date mean? What can we expect? What options will happen after? And then talk to us about the current administration, please.
Sure, I'd be pleased to. The June 30th date is kind of follows the pattern that we've all experienced since the program was first authorized in 1992. There was one actual lapse in the program. There might have been two back in the late 90s when the program was being looked at real hard to improve it, but it was short-lived. We have dealt with expiration dates on a 2-month basis, 3-month basis. I mean, it's been kind of crazy. I believe there have been 18 authorizations over the last 5 years or so. And through that entire process, the objective always was to improve the program, introduce new integrity reforms, and just make it better for the investor. In the past, the bill rolled along the omnibus spending package, which authorized the government's full fiscal year of spending. And those many times have kind of been stop, start, short-term authorizations, and EB5 rolled along with that. In an attempt to separate the EB5 program from that omnibus bill, in order to improve the program, it was separated. And so a clean legislative package is being introduced by Senator Grassley, Senator Leahy here anytime now. It's just a matter of days. And the program, the good news is the program has bipartisan support. And given the pandemic that we've been through and the economic impact it's had on the country, EB5 is going to be one of the tools to help the country get out of the ditch, if you will, like it did after the economic crisis in 2008, 2009. And we're pretty excited about the support we have from it and the changes that are coming, which will be good for the investor. In addition, the Biden administration is much more pro-immigration than the Trump administration was. And you can argue the logic of both positions, but we have seen recently statements from the White House that they would like to address some of the issues with derivatives or family members counting against the cap, potentially even expanding the EB categories in terms of visas available. And combined with that, there's a new director of DHS, Alejandro Mayorkas, who actually ran CIS, which is the agency that processed all the filings. And during that period of his administration, we saw a much quicker, more efficient handling of case files, and we're already beginning to see an improvement in that. So overall, we're very optimistic about the future of the program, and we're looking forward to continuing to work closely with the offices that are driving the legislation. And we have basically a daily dialogue with them as we get close to introducing, along with all offices in Congress. And the support is very, very strong. I mean, there's no question we'll get a new package here shortly. So we don't see a lapse. That's something we've dealt with in the past. It's always been renewed because it's a good program for the United States. And it's a really good program for investors that are looking to access the United States and come in one of the quickest ways possible. So we feel real good about where we are as an association, as an industry, and not just for the regional centers and the attorneys that are involved, but for the investors globally.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Bob. So what I heard is that June 30th is the expiration date. We expect the current legislation, the proposed bill to pass, and that's what IIUSA and the industry has been working towards. And Biden's administration has indeed been much friendlier to the immigration process as a whole. So we're excited about that change for the industry because we expect some of the processes to become smoother, as they always have. I do frequently get asked quite by my investors about how quickly the changes come about, because I've literally had clients who thought that the day that Biden will take office, we're going to see quicker processing times. And there are certain things that the new administration has done literally in the first few days. They've reversed some travel bans, they've reversed some visa bans already. So those are almost immediate changes. However, we should let everybody know that the changes when it comes to actual processing times and things that have to go through the agency, we anticipate that those changes will take months to take effect, because we're talking about thousands of petitions. So to accelerate that process takes a long time. It's not just done by the president. So let's move on to the next topic, which I just try to kind of introduce: processing times. How long does the process take? If an investor makes a decision to invest today, they find a project that they like tomorrow, when can they expect to see their green cards? How long does the process take? And is there anything we can do to make it faster? And Aaron will cover that topic for us.
Sure. So if you look into the USCIS website, the numbers might actually scare you a little bit, right? There, right now, it says about 28 to 44 months, or some really high amount of time between you file your I-526 petition up until you can get approved for it or get an adjudication. Having said that, there are several aspects that will ease that right now. I mean, as you can see right now, 31 to 48. One is that starting from earlier last year in March, USCIS adopted a new processing approach for I-526 petition that is based on visa availability, which means for anyone from Russia or CIS region, etc., will generally enjoy a faster I-526 adjudication, because there are certain countries like mainland China or Vietnam where the visa availability takes longer to become available. That is why USCIS is processing other regions prior to that. That is one advantage. Two, we do that, and some of the other regional centers do that as well, to be able to assist their clients to compel USCIS to act within reasonable timelines. And I'm saying reasonable in quotes because that's a kind of legal claim, through administrative actions called mandamus actions. So that allowed, for example, us to remain around 24 months of adjudication time. And I think that's another advantage of working with a regional center instead of just going direct, because these are professionals who are kind of helping you to be able to get these things done together with your attorneys as well. I just have to say that Eb5 is still one of the fastest paths to green card whilst you're enjoying a passive investment. I think one question that was on the slide is about how COVID have affected the processing times. And There was initially a short-term freeze or slowdown in early 2020, but given there were only few applications at that time because of COVID. I mean, people didn't want to move much, and everybody was kind of shocked. To be frank, it did not impact the processing times as much, except with lesser applications in the queue today. The trend is expected to be downward trending, at least by certain professionals, including us being optimistic about it. The main impact is on the visa interviews after the petition is approved, where the COVID resulted in a slowdown in consular activities to be able to actually obtain the visa. What it means is that you get your approval, yay, you're in Moscow, would like to go to your consulate to be able to get your visa issued so you can land into the United States. But because the consular activities are slow or even throughout 2020 stopped for a while, that actually impacted the timeline that you can do that. So that's where COVID played, I think, a bigger role than just the processing times. And I think there was an item about age outs on this, which I will very briefly touch because it's kind of a technical item, and you can research and mainly actually check with your immigration attorney, which is the best resource for that. Would be technically a dependent's child or like all the ages on that will be frozen during the processing time. But when the processing is completed and the adjudication is done, that freeze is removed. So the clock starts ticking again. And if you cannot obtain your visa for a long time because of the consular closures, etc., that may be a concern, because if they go about 21 years of age, then they lose the ability to be able to join the family members to immigrate to the United States with the same application. But I'd like to say, I mean, this is again a very kind of a niche risk and should be mitigated by discussions with your immigration attorney. I would not just go too deep in that, but just because it was on the slide, I just wanted to cover that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you so much, Aaron. So to summarize, the general processing times are about 3 years from the moment that the investor will make an investment to the moment that they're probably going to see their green card. And during COVID, you know, definitely I can confirm from our practice, the processing times have not increased during COVID because of the pandemic. Actually, we've seen that immigration has been very active in reviewing the applications, but it's true we've seen some slowdowns once the applications are approved. Trying to get to the consulate and getting the actual green cards has been a challenge because many US consulates are still closed. So let's move on to the next subject, which are the key takeaways. And Rush, can you summarize for us what are the takeaways for the prospective investors? And Rush, you're still on mute.
There, okay. Well, I would say, kind of going backwards, as Aaron was talking about on processing times, we look forward to the day when we have standard processing times. During COVID and certainly in the last administration, things got kind of out of whack. Things slowed down considerably. Adjudications went much more slowly than they had been in the past. And as Bob was saying, we have a new administration, new head of Homeland Security that knows the EB5 program. And so we look forward to quicker processing times and more standard processing times, because when someone asks us, what can I expect? It's a tough question to try to answer. And as you said, showed on the slide, USCIS has a timeline that's quite frankly not accurate and somewhat artificial. So processing times, we look to good improvement there, as Aaron was saying and Bob was saying in his takeaways on the new Biden administration. In terms of legislation, as Bob said, we've got a wonderful program. It's a job creating program. It costs the taxpayer and government absolutely nothing. It's had bipartisan support for many years. We've had this reauthorization year in, year out. We've been going through this for many, many years now. As Bob was saying, we have a bill that has been negotiated with the IIUSA team, with Senators Grassley and Leahy, and expect that to be introduced very soon, and very optimistic that that 5-year reauthorization that's in that bill will be adopted. So I think we've got a great program. We have very optimistic as to the continuation of the program. And quite frankly, we even hope that there will be some growth in the program, but that's the first step, is just to get reauthorization. We have, as is mentioned here, new TEA data. As I mentioned earlier, TEA is a targeted employment area. It's based on one of two qualifications: either you're rural, which is very much a definitional thing, and then an urban distressed area, which is high unemployment area. And that's based on employment data that is geographic specific. There's new data coming out on that that will determine what areas qualify as TEA. So all of this is kind of a moving target, but it's a great program, has worked for many, many investors over many, many years. As Noreen said, they've been working 20 years in this program and seen thousands and thousands of investors get their green cards, and if they choose to do so, even go to apply for citizenship. So we look forward to working with the people out there from Russia, CIS, and elsewhere around the world in moving forward. And I'll turn it to Noreen to kind of kick it off and kick it to the next panel of where we go from here.
So Noreen, if you can tell us, if an investor loved everything that they heard today, they're interested, they want to help their family relocate to the United States, what are the 3 steps? Where do they start?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for these, next basic steps that the next panel will talk to you in more detail about, for me, like really 2 important factors that when you are looking at moving forward and selecting an attorney, looking at projects, and then making a decision on, what you're going to invest into, who you're going to invest with, are looking at the track records and the alignment of your goals. And so as that pertains to selecting an attorney, every investor, we require as a regional center, and all of my colleagues on this call as well, for our investors to hire an independent immigration attorney. Really important, in my opinion, is that independence. That attorney, if you're an investor, is your fiduciary. They're going to be looking after you, and they're going to be in charge of everything from the individual side of the petition, everything that pertains to you and your family, to your source of funds, your path of funds, and everything in between. And I know, Irina, you can add a little bit more, but look at the experience of your attorney. How many 526s, how many 829s have they filed? What issues have they had to overcome for their investors? Because you want an attorney that has had to overcome RFEs. It's normal to get an RFE. That's the only way for the USCIS to ask questions. But how have they overcome those RFEs? That's incredibly important. And that sort of translates into the next step, which is, project due diligence, and then final is project selection. Those same fundamental concepts, which are looking at the track record of, the regional center involved. How long have they been doing this? What's their track record? When they've, look at COVID right now. How have their projects been impacted, and how have they protected their investors? Take a look at how they've dealt with, potential issues within a project, and what have they done for their investors? Have they, had 829 approvals? Have they had repayment? Have they had to redeploy? What is their redeployment strategy? And so, as an investor, if you're looking to move forward, for me, I want you to find an attorney and a project and a regional center that has your best interests and that has a track record of success. Specifically, when you're looking at, project due diligence, Rush mentioned it in the last slide, which is there's new TEA data, coming out. That's something that you should be aware of. That doesn't impact rural projects, for example, but it does impact projects that qualify under the 150% of the national unemployment rate. And so how is new data going to impact, for example, a current raise? If you want to move forward in the next 30 days, okay, what if that project has half of its EB5 funding in? Well, what if the project doesn't qualify as a TEA, come end of April? Well, where is that gap in funding going to come in? That regional center should be able to tell you exactly where and explain it to you. And it shouldn't be, oh, they'll go out to the capital markets. That should scare you because the capital markets aren't just throwing additional money into projects right now. And then, when it comes to, again, that project due diligence and selection, what are your goals as an investor? Green card. What does that have to do with jobs? Jobs, jobs, jobs. When are jobs created? How are jobs created? Take a look at that. And then, obviously, once jobs are created, you're going to have a different worry. Your worries are going to vary through the process. First, it's going to be, am I going to get my green card? Have my jobs been created? After that, you're going to say, okay, now I have my green card, but where's my money? And so you want to not just look at, how are jobs created, when are jobs created, but also then that next step is, how is this project going to repay me? And there should be a plan from the beginning. And those are generally the things that you should be looking at. And like Irina and Mackenzie said, the next panel is going to talk in a whole lot more detail about those, but I hope that this gets kind of your mind thinking as to, what should I be looking for? And, what do I need to do to make the best decision possible?
Thank you so much, Noreen. And like you said, not all projects, not all attorneys are the same. You absolutely want a regional center that has had many years of experience of working with the immigration program, with the constantly changing rules, and they're anticipating the changes, and they're making sure that when they're planning a project, a change in the TEA is not going to create such a burden that the project doesn't move forward, doesn't get built. And same with attorneys. You want your attorney to know what the requirements are and be able to fight for you when it's necessary. Because one thing that I think it's important for the applicants to understand is immigration officers are not always correct. Sometimes they demand too much information. Sometimes they can overlook certain things, and work with attorneys who have had experience. We have done appeals on our clients' behalf. Even if they started with other attorneys and got denied, we've done appeals that we've won, and it's definitely very important. But it's also important for your attorney to tell you the truth in the beginning. If you lack sufficient documentation to start with, you want a lawyer who is going to tell you that, and not someone who's going to encourage you to proceed unless you can gather the necessary documents. So thank you so much for the summary. And now we will
Irina, I will say the slide says 3 steps, and you'll have 2 bullets we have 2 bullets there. I think Noreen hit on really the bullet that slides between those 2, and that is the regional centers. As we often say, this is not, the EB5 investment is not a transaction, it's a relationship. And so you want to know that both the attorney and the regional center that you're going to be dealing with, you have confidence in them, and confidence that they know what they're doing, and that they'll be around to work with you through the entire process that obviously will last several years. So Noreen hit on that and discussed that very eloquently, but I'd put that in there as that middle bullet, which is comfort with the regional center that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And luckily for the investors and for clients who are coming in to work with this program today, you can look at the history of the regional centers. You can look at the history of the law firms. When I started working with this program, which was almost 10 years ago, at the time, so many regional centers have been completely new. It was very difficult to choose the better ones because most of them have had less than 3 or 4 years of active operation in EB5. At this point, you have companies that have been in the market for years that really have proved themselves to be A, trustworthy, B, competent. So I think it's a really good market for the investors. Let's go into the questions. We have a question from Vasily Ilin. Do the 10 jobs have to be sustained through the whole time between the I-5 to 6 and the I-8 to 9? The lucky winner of responding to that question is going to be Aaron.
Sure. The question is, I think, let me take a look at it again.
Do the 10 jobs have to be sustained the entire time between the I-5 to 6 and the I-8 to 9?
Look, one of the advantages of working in the regional center program is that over the years that the regional center program has adapted into what project financing needs as well. Because when we look into projects, it's most of the EB5 projects you will see are construction projects. And when you look into project financing, you cannot you cannot invest and expect to create the jobs for the next 2 years during the sustainment period only, and then get it done. That was more geared towards the direct EB5 program. So regional center program has more flexibilities built into it to be able to allow playing with the timelines, to be able to match a secure real estate investment structure into and the EB5 or your immigration goals and the rules. So very basic response to that. As long as you invest, your investment comes in to the project before the construction is completed, the jobs can be actually counted towards job creation, even if they are created before you invest in it as well. So that gives that flexibility and ability to real estate projects to be able to create the jobs in a realistic, feasible timeline rather than just going by the immigration timeline. So, but the sustainment for it is that those jobs have to be really created, evidenced, and yes, those jobs have to be maintained for at least 2 years to be able to showcase that at the I-829 stage. So I gave more kind of from a project financing standpoint a response, but for practical reasons, as long as you invest before the construction is complete or the eligible job creation expenditures are completed, then you are fine as long as the project is completed and you can evidence that to USCIS at the I-829 stage.
Excellent.
To add a little color, Aaron mentioned the 2 years, but one of the things that regional centers get to use are model-derived indirect and induced jobs. And so if you have a massive construction project, and let's say it lasts 3 years, as long as, again, as Aaron said, as long as your money goes in while construction is happening, you would actually be getting credit for the direct jobs because the construction lasts more than 2 years, the indirect jobs and induced jobs. Let's say the construction only lasts of a different project 18 months. What you wouldn't be able to count are those model-derived direct jobs because the construction doesn't last more than 2 years. But what you would be relying on are the indirect and induced jobs from those qualified construction expenditures. And so getting to the crux of your question is those 10 jobs do not have to be sustained the whole time between the 5-6 and the 8-9. What I like to say is we rely on construction jobs. Once the project's built, jobs are created. That part, your green card, one of the major components, it's done.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. And I don't see at the moment more questions, but I will invite the audience. We do have a couple more minutes before the next panel starts. So if you want to ask a question, there is a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. It's different from the chat option. So we ask that you try to ask the questions in the Q&A option. Mhm. And but I will
I see in the chat there is a question about the timeline for legislation. I think we already answered that, which is no specific timeline, but the expectation is the Grassley-Leahy bill will be introduced very shortly.
Mhm.
And work very closely with IIUSA, Bob and others, working with the offices there, and the expectation is that should be introduced. Passing is a matter of, we can't predict that. We're obviously hopeful and optimistic that it'll pass before June 30 in order to reauthorize the program without any lapse in the program.
Yes.
And Irina, could I jump in with a comment? I just want to kind of reinforce what Noreen said earlier, and I think Rush touched on it. Irina definitely did. With respect to evaluating regional centers and attorneys, experience is everything. And there's an old saying, history repeats itself. So as the investors are looking to make an investment, many times they're more comfortable with a particular category, which is great. That's why there are many projects that are out there. But looking at the history of the regional center, how long they've been around, the attorney is critical, and the success they've enjoyed and the experience they have, because they represent the investor. And there are always going to be challenges with respect to the filings and follow-up questions from the government. So a skilled, experienced attorney that's got through all those different challenges for the investor is really critical. In the mid 2010s through probably about 2018, there are 800 plus regional centers active in the industry, and that number grew from 200 so to 800 in a very short period of time because people thought it was an easy business. Since then, a lot of those regional centers that were well-intentioned and thought it'd be a good way to raise capital to fill out their projects, found out how difficult the business really is. And today I would say there are probably a couple hundred that are actively engaged, and of that number, there's a fairly good number of regional centers that have successfully represented projects on behalf of clients and gotten them through the whole process, and they're in the business to stay. So as you do your research, history, as Noreen mentioned, and Irina, is really, really important to make sure you land with someone that has been in the business for a significant amount of time, knows the business, has been successful, and has delivered the objectives that you're concerned about. There are a number of really good regional centers that are members of IIUSA, and we're all committed to the same thing, to protect the investor and to deliver really what the investor wants, which is a successful landing in the United States and to have capital returned. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there are definitely great companies that are interested in seeing this program succeed. And, we're, as Bob, you mentioned, we're in it for the long term, and that is who you want to work with. You want to work with companies that plan to do more projects after your project is done, so they will care about your future success and their own reputation. Thank you so much for the panelists. We just have, I think, a couple more minutes before we should turn it over to the next panel. If we don't have any questions from the audience, let me just do one last check in the Q&A. Oh, we have two. All right, so excellent question. Is there any return on the capital investment? Bob, do you want to cover that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main return on the capital investment is American citizenship, if so desired, and if not, a permanent green card in the United States. The program typically, from a capital structure standpoint, because of the complexity of the capital raises, et cetera, and the projects, if properly structured, are fairly conservative in terms of returns for the, the main equity players. does not provide a large return in terms of what people typically think of. You know, the trade-off has been access to the United States in a very short period of time, putting your capital at risk in exchange for quick access and a permanent green card. So the returns are small. More important, I think, is what you receive if the project is successful, and hopefully it will be for you. Capital return back, but a very, very nominal return on that money. But I would argue that the big return really is access to the United States and participating in the capital formation in the country and thinking like an entrepreneur, putting money at risk for the return of access to the United States. That's basically the way the program is set up.
Just to add to that very quickly, I think all the groups here, I think, and I believe, and I know actually, are very conservative and very diligent in what they do. And I encourage, this is still a real investment. And as a real investment, we kind of encourage people to look into the underlying asset. This is a real estate investment. You have to understand it. You have to always ask the right questions. I fully agree with the previous track record. We also kind of proud about it, but also Apple doing great phones doesn't necessarily mean iPhone 13 will be the best phone. So you have to understand the actual product you're investing in, have to ask questions and expect really transparent, accountable answers about the asset class or the specific project you're investing in. Because if this is a small return, as Bob mentioned, then all the stars need to be aligned for this to be a feasible, strong, conservative investment deserving your capital.
Irina, I think someone asked a follow-up question, which I wanted to provide a little bit of clarity on as well, which they said, you know, I see quite a few projects that offer a 7 to 10% ROI, which seems too high. Is that a red flag? So one of the things that I wanted to piggyback on what, you know, Bob had said was, again, 100% agree. What is your return? It's the green card. It's the path towards citizenship. But one of the things that you will see, and we briefly touched upon regional centers. Within, you know, looking at a regional center and its relation to a project, I would kind of categorize, you know, two different structures generally that you will see within EB5. One I call standalone, which the regional center is not affiliated, related to, and has no connection with that borrower or where the funds are at the project level. And those are standalone projects. And then the other category that you will see are what I like to call vertically integrated, where you have the developer of the project who is also the regional center. And those are typically where investors will see a higher, you know, return on their investment. Just like in investments generally, typically, and you know, this person eloquently pointed it out, is that a red flag? Well, return is typically indicative of risk. And so when you have a vertically integrated regional center, I mean, take a look what's happening right now. And I think that if people Google, you know, EB5 and vertically integrated, they can see some examples of it. But what's going to happen to, you know, there's conflicts of interest. So investor here's a higher rate of return, but there's that inherent conflict of interest, because are they going to sue themselves on behalf of the investors to either maybe it's complete construction or get their money back? So that higher rate of return truly is, in my opinion, you know, indicative of the additional risks that investors are taking when they invest in vertically integrated regional centers, because there's always going to be inherent conflict of interest. And unfortunately, right now, for some, you know, investors, that conflict is playing out right now.
Thanks for that, Noreen. And not to cut in, Irina, but we're towards the end of our time here, and we're starting to get into the territory of the next panel's discussion. I do see that there's some more questions here in the Q&A, and I promise we'll get to those during our next panel discussion. Thank you again, though, to all of our panelists here. Your expertise, of course, is greatly appreciated. To note, if you were late to join the discussion, the recording will be made accessible for this panel and the subsequent panel as well, and we'll ensure that that's sent out to all the registrants shortly after we conclude today. So thank you again, and with that, I want to turn things over to our next group of panelists. So if our first panelist can put themselves on mute and say goodbye, and our next panelists can turn on their cameras and their microphones, we're going to go ahead and get started right away.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
Everyone.
Thank you. Our next panel here, as you'll see on the screen, is a look ahead to opportunities in 2021, investor market trends and project due diligence. So again, we'll be answering some of these more immigration specific and project due diligence questions here on this discussion. So I want to give our panelists for the second discussion an opportunity to introduce themselves. So again, going in alphabetical order here. Vivara, are you on? There you are. Want to go ahead and introduce yourself in second wind?
Yeah, thank you, Mackenzie. My name is Varvara Latintseva. I'm operational manager in Second Wind company. We are based in Moscow. We are a small boutique company which is working with Eb5 investor and helping them to understand the process, because the Eb5 is pretty complicated process, especially in comparison with other programs which are available in Europe or let's say in Caribbeans. And basically helping investor to choose the project, to choose the lawyer, and go through all the steps of the process hand by hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivara. Natalia Poltukin, want to introduce yourself?
Close enough. Yeah. I am based of Phoenix, Arizona, work primarily with investors from Russian-speaking countries, meaning from Russia and satellite countries such as Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Moldova. I primarily focus on Eb5 and other investment categories, work on business immigration for about 10 years now, and I think I specialize mostly in complex source of funds coming from those countries.
Perfect, thank you. And our other Natalia Pronina, want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mackenzie. Добрый вечер, уважаемые участники вебинара. My name is Natalia Pronina. I work for Eb5 Capital Regional Center. I lead our company's development and work with investors from all Russian-speaking countries in Eastern Europe. And I'm happy to be on this panel today.
Great, thank you, Natalia. Brent, there.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Brent Raymond. I have approximately 9 years experience in the Eb5 industry managing regional centers and their daily operations. The Green Mountains Regional Center is located in a rural area in the most populous section of the United States, the Northeast. So we combine the benefits of a rural project, but with a large population and traffic through to our projects. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and speak a little bit about market trends and due diligence.
Thank you, Brent. Alvin Wong.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Mackenzie. Hi, everybody. I'm Alvin. I'm with Manhattan Regional Center, where since 2011, Manhattan Regional Center has been successful in helping hundreds of Eb5 investors across the world by providing attractive projects in New York City. Manhattan Regional Center has a world-class team of seasoned professionals from many different fields, including immigration law, banking, accounting, financing, construction development. And we work closely together to achieve immigration and investment success for its investors. And I think we are, we really embrace our motto of being a team that you can trust. And so hopefully we can help investors, maybe like those in the audience today.
Thank you, Alvin. And Kurt, I didn't forget you. Kurt Royce will be the moderator for today's discussion, so I wanted to have him introduce himself last. And Kurt, just so you know, I have control of the PowerPoint, so when you're ready to move forward with the slides, just let me know, and I'm in control of them.
Great, thanks, Mackenzie. Hi, my name is Kurt Royce. I founded a company called Eb5 Marketplace. which is essentially a large selection of EB5 investments. We perform due diligence on these projects, and then we make that information available to people using an investment platform, an online investment platform. We've made it as easy as possible to do the depth of research that you should do on an investment before selecting one. And so I'm quite proud of what we've done. So that's me. And I guess it's time to move to the next slide, Mackenzie. What interest level do we expect from Russia? You know, before we get into the Russian market, Mackenzie, can you go to the next slide? Opportunities in 2021. There's a lot going on, and I thought we'd start with Natalia Pronina. Natalia, what do you see as an opportunity in 2021 or 2022 for EB5?
Thank you, Kurt. So as a company that has been working with the Russian market for many years now, starting back in 2012, I should say that current turbulence in the immigration sphere, in the economic sphere, opens up opportunities. It does open up opportunities for regional centers to offer projects that would be unusual to some people, right? To structure projects that offer maybe higher returns, to offer equity investment structure, in addition to a standard EB5 projects that offers you a very low return, but a structured investment timeline. So it's more opportunities for us as a companies who work with our investors. We listen to our clients. We want to make sure that we cater to those goals that our investors have. Also, I think that this time is an opportunity for the industry as a whole to make that change, to get a long-term extension, which would be really great for every player in the industry.
I agree. I think that the future does hold a lot more diversity in the investment types that we'll have access to. I also agree that we're likely to see higher rates of return. In fact, we're starting to see those now. And I'll turn to Alvin Wong. Alvin, you are familiar with this new bill, the Reform and Integrity Act, that we're hoping to see passed soon. Are there any elements of that bill that you think will benefit the investors in EB5?
Thank you for the question, Kurt. I think one of the big things that have been sort of hanging over our EB5 industry is the fact that there was a lack of transparency and just accountability. We've heard there are horror stories with investors losing all their money because of the irresponsible activities of developers, regional centers, whatnot. And so one of the main things for this upcoming legislation we find is how much more information investors can get from regional centers, from the parties associated with these transactions. So the integrity portion of this bill is very important. I think the biggest takeaway is that once the investors become associated with this transaction, they'll have more access. They'll have more protections in place to know that their investment and their hard-earned money is being protected. I think that's the biggest thing for us from a regional center point of view. We will be given more rules by which we need to abide that offers more protections for investors. And that's, at the end of the day, that's great for everybody. It's great for the industry because it'll be seen as being more safe. It'll help with the reputation of everything. And hopefully that will help build the industry up for everybody.
Terrific, Alvin. I totally agree with you. I think this Reform Act and Integrity Bill has the potential not only to extend the program for 5 more years, which we're all hoping to see, but it also will protect investors by requiring certifications of regional centers to make sure that all the rules are being followed, and it's quite good, I think, for the industry in a whole. Natalia Poltukin, How are you this morning? Can you hear me, Natalia?
Natalia, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Natalia,
Yes.
you are one of the, I think, thought leaders in this industry, and certainly know Russia quite well, having a lot of familiarity there. What do you see as opportunities in the next year or two for EB5?
Well, it's like a complex question right now because I sense a great deal of frustration coming from Russian audience, from Russian investors, because, you know, approval rates kind of plunging and processing time is expanding, and people do not know what to expect, especially in view of 30th of June coming soon. I think it's very important to educate Russian audience on actual benefits of EB5 and actual merits of EB5. And I see lots of interest actually diverting into that direction. People are starting asking practical questions, not like just questions, okay, when will I get my green card and when my kids can go to the college in the United States? They're asking questions about the merits of their investment, how they will get return, how much returns they should expect, like when the investment will be repaid. All these questions are valid, and I think competitive benefits of regional centers who can present that information, it cannot be underestimated. If you can talk to Russian investors in terms of money and value of the investment, you probably will be the leader in the industry in that segment, in that market.
Terrific. And I'm just going to say that I think your point of the unknowns that are facing us right now is chilling the market to some degree. People want to see more certainty, and certainly until we get reauthorization, there is a sense that people aren't sure how their petitions would be dealt with. So I think that's a really good point. And as soon as those unknowns become more clearly known, I certainly think that is a big potential change and an opportunity in 2021 and 2022 for EB5. And then I think your point about the interest of investors digging deeper into the projects that they invest in, I see that trend quite a bit myself. Brent, I just want to toss to you the same question. What do you see ahead for EB5 in the next year or two?
I think with the new integrity measures of the EB5 extension, as Alvin mentioned in the previous panel, discussed a little bit, that there's real opportunity for EB5 investors. It really creates requirements for all actors in an EB5 deal, whether it be a regional center, the new commercial enterprise, or the job creating enterprise, to fulfill responsibilities that maybe perhaps weren't fulfilled in the past by some actors in the EB5 industry. It requires regional centers to file exemplars, for example, business plans, which many regional centers, as a matter of habit, do anyways, but it sets up that requirement for all regional centers and all projects involved in the EB5 industry space. And that particular requirement allows USCIS to look at the project, the pro forma, the business plan, the economic analysis, and really do an analysis before they get that first I-526 submission from an initial investor. Another example is that it precludes bad actors from participating in the regional center program, whether those bad actors be with the regional center, the new commercial enterprise, or the job creating enterprise. And what does bad actors mean? It means people that have been convicted of crimes, means people that have violated US securities laws and other circumstances, individuals that you wouldn't want to place your trust in. So it really places strong, stringent demands on the individuals that are associated with an EB5 project. It also reinforces that EB5 projects must be in compliance with securities laws. You think that would be a basic precept and understanding for people in this industry, but it just puts that into black and white and into print. And finally, it provides an opportunity for relief of investors that may be involved in a deal that somehow something occurs and there's problems with the deal. It allows them an exit from the bad deal and entry into a new commercial enterprise, new regional center, if they so choose. So I think that's a substantial opportunity, this bill. Second opportunity was again mentioned in the previous panel, is that processing times can do nothing but improve from the slow processing times that we're seeing now. With Mayorkas heading Department of Homeland Security, he has a track record of creating efficiencies at USCIS. He understands the program well. And I think that just the basic presidential administration right now is much more friendly to immigration. So the immigration process can't be anything but improved for those people that have applied for not only EB5 visas, but any sort of visas. And then finally, I think that there's a real opportunity if you're looking at rural projects. Rural projects, I think, have an opportunity for investors of providing a little bit added safety with the current economic crisis that the United States is experiencing because of the pandemic. I don't believe this crisis will last for a long period of time, but it's already impacted multiple industries and impacted them in a way that, we're seeing statistics on certain industries, of failure that are quite substantial. Rural projects, you do not have to rely on a economic analysis through the feds and a changing landscape of unemployment numbers. So investors should look at rural projects, but they should also be aware that, as the former panel discussed, that you really have to get into the minutia of every single EB5 project that you're looking at. And if you don't have the sophistication, you should definitely rely on third parties, trusted advisors, accountants, attorneys with experience in whatever deal that you're looking at for an EB5 project.
Great. So I'll just quickly summarize. In order to qualify for a $900,000 investment, a project needs to be located either in a rural market, that means outside of a city with a population, I don't know the number, but maybe it's 20,000. You probably know, Brent. And the alternative would be it's in a high unemployment area, meaning the unemployment rate is 50% higher than a national average. And Brent's point is that can change. But so long as you invest and you check to make sure that the employment rates are high enough when you invest, you should be fine. But if you're planning on investing and things change, that can throw you off. So there is that benefit to investing in a rural market that gives you confidence that no matter when you're ready to invest, the work that you've put into understanding this investment is not going to change things if they have to raise their investment amount to 1.8. Brent, you also mentioned about exemplars being required in the new Integrity and Reform Act. I'm going to ask you a question just to hypothesize, but do you think, because the Immigration Service is going to require that projects file this exemplar application, that we could see acceleration in adjudications when they start to act a little bit more coherently and intelligently and recognize that, hey, if we approve this project once, it's suddenly approved for all future investors, and that can speed up the processing time? Do you think that's going to happen under this administration?
Yeah, my years of experience previously, when a project has an exemplar approval, USCIS relies on that for the project side of the due diligence and review of the individual applicant's I-526. So I think that will be a further advantage in streamlining the process at USCIS and reducing processing times for the I-526. Not that they can't go back and re-review their approval of an exemplar, but it definitely creates streamlining of the process and can reduce processing for individual I-526 submissions.
It sure makes sense. Natalia Pultukin, do you have a sense of How would you interpret that question as to exemplars?
So in current situation, I do not see lots of practical benefits of 924 because adjudication time almost aligned with adjudication time of 526. So basically, if regional center files 924 and it waits for approval and only then starts subscribing investors, it probably will delay adjudication process by several years. So practice is lots of regional centers collect investments and people file 526 and it gets adjudicated almost simultaneously with 924, which is okay. I mean, I always prefer a regional center. If I refer a client somewhere, I always prefer a regional center who files 924 because it's kind of a item on a checklist that regional center is compliant, that they're transparent, they're willing to work with CIS, proving their credentials. That's great. But I hope with new administration, we will see faster track of adjudication of 924. It will bring like all this system back to work as it used to be like before previous presidential administration. And obviously 924 would be like a great medal to have like displayed by regional centers. Approval of 924 would undeniably indicate to the client that they have better chance of approval of 526. Yes, right. I'm all for it, of course.
Right. Okay, just for clarity for the audience, if you don't know, a 924 form is what we call an exemplar. And what it really essentially is an example submission of the project. So once the government approves this example submission of a project, then they should be willing to approve all of the petitioners who file after that. So let's move on to the Russian market. And Varvara, how are you? Must be late.
Good. Yeah, thank you. It's already evening here.
So Varvara, I just wanted to help you introduce to us the Russian market. What level of interest do you foresee in Russia for EB5? And by the way, let me just set that up and that you also offer citizenship by investment programs around the world, right?
No, we work only with EB5 and that's our specialization. And we work with business and investor immigration to US and only to US. But of course, while we are based in Russia, we see all the programs which are popular in here, and we see a lot of interest to European programs and to US as well. If we talk about EB5 particularly, I would say that in general market for EB5 is still beyond developing stage because first of all, not all people know that this option exists. And secondly, when they start to look for information, it's often they get lost in the different interpretation they meet online and from different people, and they're not reaching the stage of understanding program fully to decide for themselves that they want to move forward with EB5. But if we talk about interest level, even within the last 3-4 years, it's definitely going up.
You know, I think a point that you alluded to is the complexity of EB5. It must feel very challenging to someone in another country who speaks another language to understand all of the details that go into the EB5 program. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point because when investors started to look into EB5, they compare it with different programs they heard before, like program which existed in Cyprus, programs which exist like in Spain, Portugal, Greece, so let's say Caribbean programs, which a bit more well known in Russia in comparison to EB5, but in EB5, the principle of program is completely different in its basics. And from the moment persons start to actually understand how it's working, it may take for a while. And actually, coming back to your previous slide, opportunities of 2021, I would say that for investors, if we say about opportunities, despite the fact that processing time would ideally get better within the following year or two, still, if you apply for Eb5 now, you would get your I-526 approved early, even like in comparison with application in the second half of the year. And if you look into Eb5 now it's a time to spend to understand how the program works, to start looking for immigration lawyer for the project to invest, to make sure you're able to file your petition before June 30th. Because we still don't know what's going to happen after June 30th and how long it will take for the regional center to make sure they comply with the new regulation. Of course, we hope it's going to go smoothly and efficiently, but I guess no one knows. So if you're seriously considering Eb5, it's worth to proceed now.
Right. Yeah, I think that as far as this program seeming so complicated, I will tell the audience that with the right information, it's actually not that complicated. We've got a number of projects on our platform, and they are, to a large degree, they feel like they're safe both from an immigration standpoint and from a return of capital standpoint. You need to look at these carefully and know them, but I do think that there should be a lot more comfort in this industry than maybe it seems, because without digging in, it's really hard to know what are you agreeing to, and so that can cause a lot of confusion. Vivara, one more question. How do you find that people typically find out about Eb5 in Russia? Do they do it through a lawyer? Do they do it through an agency?
That's a good question. In many cases, the investors just started to look for information how to move to US, and they started considering different options. And of course, there is internet, which is very helpful, and they may come across the information about Eb5. Of course, in many cases, they initially going to immigration lawyer in US and trying to receive information there. But the point is that not all immigration lawyers are familiar with Eb5. We even had once feedback from the client that their lawyer said, well, I'm not sure how it's working. So very important to come across the lawyer who has experience in Eb5 in the past and explain the process. And of course, we ourselves and another few companies are doing promotion and events in Russia where we explaining how program works and what information investor should look for when he is going for Eb5.
Right. And speaking of Russian lawyers who know the Eb5 business, Natalia Potulkin, can you tell me, for people who want to sponsor a project and they want to attract Russian interest, do they need to have somebody who speaks Russian, or do most Russians, are they comfortable enough in English? What's the situation there?
I would say it would be highly beneficial to have somebody who can reach out to the investor in their own native language. Regardless whether it's Russian or it would be Ukrainian or some other language, speaking native language is always beneficial because, we have all this Soviet heritage. Teaching foreign languages wasn't very popular back then, and lots of people who reach the age when they can invest and they're established and well-established professionals, they do not speak English, or their English is not sufficient to understand complexities of Eb5. So it would be extremely helpful to have somebody who can communicate in Russian, for example. And another thing to keep in mind if you're entering Russian market, people who start educating themselves about Eb5, they go online and they start searching and they go to Telegram canals because it's very, very popular Telegram channels, communication avenue in Russia. They go to forums, they go to Facebook pages, and they communicate with people who mostly have negative experience with EB5. People who have negative experience, they're more vocal and they're all over those places. So it's very important to communicate positive aspects of the program, and not only positive aspects, like rosy aspects of it, but actually set up realistic expectations. I think this is a huge demand in Russian market right now. Maybe Varvara is like contributing to filling out that demand. And I see that if you're like operating a reputable agency or have good representation in Russia, you have a good stake in that market. You have a good chance and good opportunity to advance your interests there.
Right. That's very interesting. I'd like to pick up that point later, but I'd like to come back to Natalia Pronina. Can you tell us a little bit about the approach that you take in Russia? EB5 Capital has, I think, had a tremendous amount of success in Russia in the past. And can you share with us a little bit of what your experience has been, both as far as which markets that you think are opportunities, and if you want, the strategies that you think would help sponsors reach out to this audience?
Thank you, Kurt. So I would like to address a few very important aspects of these questions. So when it comes to interest level, based on our company's experience, we went from very few investors in 2012 or even 2008 to more than 50 investors in 2019. So it clearly shows you that the interest is there, and the number of investors from Russia and the Russian-speaking countries is increasing. We also need to admit the fact that EB5, and not just EB5, but the United States as an immigration destination really stands out from other immigration programs that are available on the market, on the Russian market, and they're so popular, like Varvara mentioned, for the reasons that the US is always associated with a strategy. We have already passed the era of professional immigration. When I say professional, I mean older, like engineers, IT professionals, professors who immigrated in the 90s. In the 90s, when it was fairly easy to find an employer, frankly, employers from the United States were looking for employees in post-Soviet Union countries, and they were ready to sponsor them, bring them over, make sure they get green cards, and they're happy, right? So this era is over. And based on my experience, I've spent 6 years working for an immigration law firm, assisting a lawyer with preparation of all the types of business immigration petitions. So I've seen the change maybe around 2010, where we kind of like stopped seeing as many professionals, and we started to see more entrepreneurs. They were looking for various options, from starting their own business to maybe doing like an L1 visa, or being and then moving forward for the green card through EB1C, and then we started seeing EB5 investors. At first, there were like more investors who were looking for, like we've had a number of clients who started with like multinational executives work visa, L1, L1A, and then they used EB5 to get a green card, simply because it was easier for them versus, you know, doing all this hard work, making sure that they comply with the EB1C requirements. And then when I moved to the EB5 industry more in 2015, I've started to understand that the Russian audience, the Russian clientele, is a very specific type of an investor. Those people are usually well established, and they have many options available to them, right? When they think of relocation, it's not because they're looking to find a better job or a higher salary. Their interest is always linked to the family strategy. We have, like now, the majority of our Russian investors are those who want their children to study in the United States, investors who have children who have already graduated from US universities and now facing a possibility of the need to go back to Russia because they're not able to find a job and not able to find an employer who will sponsor them. So parents feel like they've paid so much money for their children to get a US diploma, and now they realize that they should be thinking about a way to make sure that their child has all the opportunities, meaning they have at least a green card and then citizenship. Also, we have a lot of investors who had their kids born in the United States, and now they're facing a new reality that their kids are growing and they want to go to school in the United States, and they want at least one parent to be able to accompany them. So that all makes the EB5 program a tool for families to make sure that they are solving their specific tasks, right? Все зависит от ваших задач, да, что вы хотите решить. And in addition, like there has been like a lot said about the complexity of the EB5 program. I should also say it has to do with the presentation, and many agencies present European programs as a very easy transaction, like give us the money, get a property in Spain or Portugal, and here's your passport. So that is why it's very important to reach out to a true professional, to the agency that will spend time explaining the key elements of a program. And in fact, Kurt, I totally agree, it's not that complicated. And in fact, all the European programs are not that easy. They just tell you it's an easy transaction, buy property. But if you read this tiny font, as we say, like in every contract, you'll find out that there are more factors that affect your citizenship or anything else that you're hoping to get through this program. So that to my mind is the state of the industry. And when it comes to our approach, we value transparency the most. And obviously our company will work with 68 countries at the moment. We have investors from all over the world, basically, and our team is big enough to be able to speak to our investors in their native language for the majority of cases. This is very important. So when investors approach us, we really make sure we answer all questions and we speak in their native language.
Great. Thanks, Natalia. So one of the things I wanted to pick up on that Natalia had mentioned about the previous failures. You know, EB5 has come through its early years. I think there's a new restart in EB5. And that's partly because COVID caused a lot of deals that looked like they weren't going to fail, they couldn't possibly fail, that are failing. And we also had a situation where investors weren't looking carefully at the investment documents that they were agreeing to. So these were one-sided agreements that favored the developer or favored somebody other than the investor. And so I think that going forward, we're now realizing that, hey, no matter where you're located, whether you're downtown Manhattan, New York City, or you're in a rural area with a great idea, deals fail, investments fail. So you want to make sure you do due diligence. And Mackenzie, that's the segue to the next slide. Okay, so due diligence. There's two aspects to doing due diligence. You want to look at the likelihood that your immigration benefits are going to come to you. And you're also going to want to look at the likelihood that you're going to get your money back safely in a timely manner. So we have to go through this fairly quickly because we only have a few minutes left. But let's talk about immigration first, because that's obviously what drives this whole investment process in the first place. When it comes to an I-526, you've got to show that you have a credible plan, that you have a job creation strategy. It's essentially to get an approved I-526, which is the first step of the two steps in immigration. You essentially need a good lawyer and a good investment. If those two, if your lawyer and your investment are structured properly, you are highly likely to get approved on the 526 stage. If your lawyer doesn't know what he's doing, he may miss something. And if the project doesn't know what they're doing, they may miss something and you can get a denial. I think a lot of the denials we've seen in the past became because the Immigration Service wasn't consistent. And we expect that they're going to become more consistent over time. And I think your 526 isn't really your liability. More likely is the I-829, where you need to prove that you've created the jobs that you promised to create, which are 10, and that your money has stayed at risk for the duration of your investment. And you need to look at, since you're projecting, you're going to need to look at a number of things to try to get comfortable with those two. If we could move on to the financial due diligence. So my background is in due diligence. We started a firm called Eb5 Diligence back in 2013. And it's that due diligence that feeds into Eb5 Marketplace today. And so I've organized due diligence into 6 buckets. The first one is the business plan and projections. You want to know that the plan makes sense, that their projections seem reasonable. You want to even test those projections to make sure that they make sense against other existing businesses. And you want to have a fairly good margin that you feel comfortable that you're going to, the business will succeed. The second aspect is about management, fiduciaries, and conflicts. And what I mean here is who's running the business? Okay, who's in charge? Have they done it before? Do they have experience? Fiduciaries are, who are the people looking after my interests? Who's protecting my money? Who's going to make sure my money doesn't move when it shouldn't move? And these kind of protections haven't been in place in a lot of deals. And when you see deals that have failed in the past, they could have failed because they didn't have a good plan, or the plan changed, or it didn't fit with the evolving environment like COVID. No one saw that coming. But we've also seen deals fail because there aren't protections in place to protect investors. And in conflicts of interest, sometimes you'll have a manager who's representing your fund, but they're also the developer. They're also representing the development. And so if there's those conflicts, you want to be certain that those conflicts are mitigated, that there are protections that are put in place. Alvin, you have a project in the market right now where you're both the manager and the developer. What kind of protections have you put in place to protect investors?
Yes, Kurt, you're absolutely right. We understand that when entities like the job creation entity and the NCE are in vertical alignment, there may seem to be conflicts of interest. And that's why we as a company, we value transparency a lot. And so we've actually hired a third-party fund administrator to oversee and be a protection against any conflicts of interest on behalf of the investor. What they do is they allow investors to see all the transactions at any given stage, and they represent investors in case of any failures. So taking example, in the worst case scenario, a project fails. I think somebody in the first panel mentioned, well, how likely is it that the developer will sue themselves to help the investor get their money back? Well, by having a third-party fund administrator in the project, in the transaction, we've actually authorized them to sue the developer on behalf of the investors so that they can get their money back. And so that is an extra layer of protection that we offer to our investors.
Thank you, Alvin. That makes a lot of sense. So you've introduced fiduciaries, people to protect the process because you're on both sides of the
right, exactly.
So the third aspect of due diligence is financing. You want to understand, is there a senior loan? Has that senior loan been finalized, or are we talking about a term sheet? And can that term sheet change? So if you were investing now, but the senior loan hadn't been finalized, could you be subject to changes? What other money is coming into the project? So you want to understand the complete picture. And if things start to go slower or not as well as expected, is there financing available for the project to tap into to protect this project to be successful and create the jobs? The fourth aspect is progress to date. How far along is this project? Has it made any progress? Has it created jobs? Have we reduced the risks to some degree? Brent, you have a project right now in Green Mountain. You've been making some progress. Can you quickly tell us about where your project is at this point?
Sure. So the first phase of our project didn't utilize any EB5 funds. It was a purely loan structure with equity injection from the developers. And that project built this luxury residential properties, built, sold majority of the infrastructure for the total development put in place. The second phase, we're utilizing approximately 20% EB5 tranche. And so we've already started construction. We've already have contracts for pre-sales of multiple units in the first building of this construction. And you know, when you're looking at a project, investors out there, you really want to look at the pro forma and see if the pro forma has anything to back up the numbers that are being presented. Is there a legitimate market study? Is there a legitimate analysis of the industry? With our project, for example, we not only have market studies, but we have the first phase of our project, which did not utilize EB5 funds and sold tremendously. So investors out there really want to look at the specifics of a deal and look at the progress to date, as you mentioned in the slide, of where the project stands. Has there been previous construction? What infrastructure has been put in place? And also what outstanding debt is in, or other funding is out there that affects the security of new investors.
Right. Thanks, Brent. Natalia Pronina, you also have a project that's been in the market a fair amount. In fact, I think you've almost filled it up. I would imagine that those people who were investing at the end of that fundraise probably were able to see a little more progress than the people who invested earlier on.
Right, but I also want to mention that when we preparing to launch a new project, we make sure that it's already under construction. So it's either started construction or it's at the stage where construction is literally starting tomorrow. Because we feel like it's that protection to our investors that we have to ensure. And at the bare minimum, even when we just working on the investment and the offering documents, meanwhile the developer has to present the permits, right? They have the permits in place, the plan when they expect each permit to be approved, so that by the time we open a project for subscription, as I said, it's already broke ground or the groundbreaking is imminent, right? So that's number one. And also the project in Washington, DC that we currently have, we still have about 1, maybe 2 spots left. It's a very unique opportunity because it offers equity investment to our investors, even though we are independent regional center. So our standard EB5 project would not offer you any high returns. It's a standard 1%. But in this project, we have a chance to offer a higher rate to our investors and additional financial benefits through the equity structure. So we're happy to discuss it more.
Okay, great. Yeah. So going back to the due diligence process. So the 6 areas that we were talking about, we've gotten to the first 4. The 5th one is exit and repayment. So you want to know what is the capability of that project to repay you, and you'd also like to see some flexibility for that project to repay you if you get approved earlier or later than you expect. Now, some of the ways you can get repaid are that the project may refinance the project. So they may have the ability to go to a bank and borrow the money. They may want to sell either the whole or portions of the assets to repay people. So you want to know what's going into the repayment, what the timing of those repayments are. One thing you want to avoid, I think, at almost all costs, you do not want your investment to be reinvested or what we call redeployed into another investment. Natalia Potulkin, do you agree with me on the danger of potentially being redeployed without knowing where that money is going to be reinvested?
I definitely see as one of the major concerns for Russian-speaking clients, because they want to have control of their money. They want to know exactly where the money is. And I see that some of them invested in regional centers because they believed in that particular regional center. Now, 6 years later, at 829 stage, they realize that the money are not in that original project anymore. And it creates a great deal of frustration for them. I know that Russian clients I know for sure, they need to realize that they're not facing redeployment with such a certainty as Chinese clients. They need to realize that. But at the same time, they're looking for regional centers affirmation that the money will be put exactly where they were intended to be. And there will not be like some unfair surprise later on. Yes, I agree with that 100%. But we understand that sometimes redeployment is a certainty, like we cannot avoid it. We have to redeploy money just to maintain eligibility. We just need to make it predictable and let the investor fair notice of that,
Right.
like to have a fair notice of that.
That's a really good, thank you for that last point. That's really, we have to understand that we are experience a program that has really been, it's been evolving and it's been changing. And to some degree, it's been stepped on by the Trump administration. You know, Trump was anti-immigrant and they did not make things easy and they did not make rules that were clear. And that will chill the environment. And now we're moving to a program, to a government that is very pro-immigration. They're much more familiar with EB5, with the head of the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees the Immigration Service, led by a guy who used to actually make decisions on EB5. So we've got a completely different environment and we think we'll see better rules. But as Natalia was saying, redeployment was necessary in some cases to protect investors so that they kept their money at risk until they got approved. Unfortunately, those understandings weren't really clear when they made their investment. So now that we know these things, we need to make sure that we consider them before we make our investment. And lastly, in our due diligence review here is what happens in case the business fails. This is a real possibility. What are your rights and remedies? Brent, I'm going to go to you. I think that you probably have a very good handle on rights and remedies, just being having the securities background that you have.
Yeah, it's essential that investors look at the structure of the deal, whether it's, you know, some people think that equity, preferred equity, you know, is not a safe structure. I disagree. It all depends whether it's a loan, equity, preferred equity. It all depends on the underlying details of the deal. So the investor really needs to ensure that they take the time and the resources, honestly, to ensure that they have a team that can really analyze the structure and look at what does happen to my investment if the business fails. How many layers of entities are between that investor and the security that is backing up their investment? Is it a loan structure? Is it an equity structure? How many are they in a second subordinated position? Or are they even further down the chain? I mean, there's some deals out there in the old days where they weren't in a subordinated position, but these deals can be very complicated, and it's essential that investors look at the structure and understand what would be necessary to make any claim on their investment to try to recoup their investment if a project does fail.
Terrific. I knew you'd come through, Brent. He's exactly right about the corporate structure. You need to understand the corporate structure because people will claim that they're offering you this great security interest, this collateral. But if you don't understand the entities that are involved, you may have a very difficult time actually taking advantage of getting access to that security interest when things start to fall apart and people start to get their hands on whatever they can. So thank you guys. I think we've done a pretty good job of covering the topics. Vivara, I feel like I haven't come to you enough. So I'd like to just ask you, is there some aspect of EB5 and as it relates to Russia that you think we haven't talked about that you think you'd like to talk about?
No, I think we covered enough for the time we had. Otherwise, I guess with experienced speakers as we have now, we may speak for another 24 hours. So from my point, if we talk about due diligence, first, what clients should do is actually understand who is regional center and what the people behind it, who is developer and what people behind it, and to whom the client will reach out if something go wrong with the project. This is the basic things which clients should understand before going deeper into the documents and details. Because sometimes what we see, they rely on immigration lawyer with advice for the project. Well, with experienced immigration lawyer, like for example, like Natalia, they may advise from their experience what the regional center have in their history and records. But if something would go wrong with the project, you will talk with the regional center and you will need to understand what's happening with developers. And once you know this, then you may go deeper into the all points you listed in this slide. I think that's it from my
Yeah,
side.
that's great, Barbara. I agree. And of course, I agree partly because, you know, the solution that I think makes sense is we have put together a numerous number of projects on a platform, all of them good projects, or else they don't qualify for the platform. And then we provide all the due diligence in a single place for people to learn about these different options. So, Mackenzie, I don't know how you want to proceed. Do we have time left? Do we want to answer questions?
Yeah, I think there's time for a couple of questions here. I see two in our Q&A function. If there are other questions, please by all means use the function down the bottom of your screen to submit those of our panelists. But Kurt, do you see those? Or you want me to go ahead and read them for you?
Yeah,
Here, I can go ahead. We had one actually two from our past panel. So the first one, it seems more of a question geared for an immigration attorney, but if a child received a 2-year conditional green card, but he'll be 22 when he goes to file the I-829, can he still file as a child of his mother, the principal applicant, or must he file his own I-829 himself?
Natalia?
I assume it's my question. Yes, basically, the age of the child is only important at the stage of 526. After 526 is approved, the child got conditional green card. It's not longer a factor in consideration. So 829 can be filed regardless of the age of the child, even if the child aged out. And it still will be, the child will still be included in that petition, and petition would cover the entire family. If we assume that family still is intact and there's no divorce, like all family members that were included in 526 originally would transfer to the 829.
And am I correct, Natalia, that the child's age freezes for purposes of?
Absolutely. It freezes at the time of the filing and basically under Child Status Protection Act. Yes.
Great. The next question is, what is failure rate of EB5? So obviously there's two elements there, right? You get the immigration failure. Natalia, can I throw that back to you? What's the rate of immigration failure in EB5?
Well. If we look at the official statistics provided by CIS, we will see that the approval rate is not that great anymore, like not as great as it used to be. Hopefully it will pick up and go back. But right now we are looking at approximately 75% approval rate. I would say most of the cases that fail in terms of immigration, not like in terms of the failed project, but in terms of the investment side, are due to the investors' inability to document lawful source of funds. So here's like the basic starting point. If you cannot prove your source of funds, just don't do EB5. Right. They will look at your source of funds. They created a special unit now that is like dedicated to the fraud prevention. If you cannot prove it clearly and explain where your money are coming from, just don't do that. However, if you're confident and you know that your source of funds is perfectly lawful, even probably not like perfectly documented, but it's perfectly lawful, you can work with it and you have a great likelihood of approval. I would say most of the cases that have been denied are either for insufficiency of proof of lawful fund or for like reasons that regional center doesn't qualify anymore.
Right. You know, if you hire a good attorney, you're going to have somebody who knows what to look for in source of funds. And so you can avoid most of the risks of failing on your immigration side if you have a good attorney. That's my experience. The other people who seem to be failing are people who invested in the wrong project. Maybe there was fraud. Maybe someone made off with the money. And you need to do your due diligence on the financial side to make sure that you're investing in a capable project with no bad actors, no people who have bad experiences in their history, and hopefully people have a great track record. Anybody else want to jump in on this failure rate?
If I may add a little bit here, I think that it is very important to work with professionals when it comes to immigration side of the process, when it comes to due diligence. And we always encourage our investors to search for these professionals and don't just rely on all information they receive from multiple sources, right? Be it your neighbor, be it an immigration blog, be it something else. Talk to professionals and make a decision. Also, I strongly believe that there are some known unknowns when it comes to risks. So you want to focus on these known unknowns and avoid them, being that when you start looking at a project, look at the track record of the regional center, look at repayments, at repayment history, ask a regional center if they can connect you with one of the best investors, maybe even from your own country, and you can learn from someone's real experience how the process goes, and make sure you ask questions from the regional center to just feel how they are open to answering your questions. Ask about maybe some difficulties that the regional center had in their history.
Okay, great. And if anyone needs an immigration lawyer and they want a referral, feel free to send me an email, and I'll get in touch with you with a person or two that I think would be worth talking to. We have one last question. It says, if a child older than 21 gets a green card, the mother can also get the green card, correct? Natalia?
Okay, here are like two components to that question. Let's say the child over 21 gets a green card, but the mother of the child is not married to the father of the child. So basically, the investor cannot sponsor like that person. Then we are going through the normal process of family-based petition and sponsoring somebody who just received a green card, became a resident that wants to sponsor somebody. But unfortunately, for residents, there is no such a category as sponsoring a parent. So here we will have to wait until that child under 21 becomes a citizen, which will take at least 5 years, maybe 6, given the processing time, and then that person can sponsor his or her mother. If investor is not married to the mother of the child, maybe it would be prudent to formalize that relationship for immigration purposes. There is nothing wrong with it. So that spouse will be included in the petition and the person will get a green card. There is no recognition of domestic partnership in immigration law as of now. So basically, just by virtue of being mother of the child, nobody gets a green card.
Great.
I hope it answers the question.
You did a great job with that. All right, Mackenzie, I think we have exhausted all of our knowledge.
Well, I saw Alvin had unmuted himself a few times. Alvin, did you want to contribute any more thoughts to the due diligence process? Or
yeah, I was about to say, the investor doing due diligence before investing is important. Also, maintaining transparency and having somebody look out for you during the investment is important, just as important as doing your due diligence beforehand. So having a third party in there representing you, being on your side during the transaction will add that extra layer of protection.
Great. Well, yeah, it looks like I think we've gotten to the end of our questions here. I want to thank all of our panelists, both on this panel and the first panel of the day. To reiterate, IIUSA, or Invest in the USA, we're the nonprofit membership association for the EB5 industry. So everyone you heard from today, they're members of the association. They have contributed to IIUSA's efforts to ensure that the EB5 program receives a long-term reauthorization, and that the markets are behaving in an ethical and transparent manner. And of course, all care about investor protections as well. So thank you again to all of our IIUSA members who were able to share their perspectives today. For anyone who might have missed a portion of the conversation, it will be available. We'll email it to you, but it'll also be available on our YouTube page as well. There also will be a follow-up email to this discussion that includes all of the marketing collateral and website links for all of our sponsors. So please do be sure to take a look at that. That's the information that all of our sponsors have provided to hopefully provide some more information on their projects and their services. Final note, our next investor market webinar discussion, we like to keep keep them coming. We'll be on March 30th when we're going to be discussing the Brazil and Latin American markets. So participation in that event is complimentary for folks who are overseas, and registration can be secured through our website. So do take a look at that. One final thank you to all of our sponsors. It was great to hear from you today, and we look forward to speaking with everyone again soon. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.